Today's topic is actually about secondaries and preparing for that all-important interview. So before I get started, I just wanted to give you a little information about me, and then we're going to kind of just jump into this because there's a lot to cover today. So my name is Dr. Anita Paschall. I'm actually, and I don't even know, that's not even correct up there. I'm an MD, PhD. I have been doing this. I'm like a freaking dinosaur. I've been doing this forever, for over 20 years. I have, as an MD, I've been like many of you guys, that pre-med student who wanted to get into med school, went through the whole process. And I'll be honest with you, most of my advice is really based on, please don't make the same mistakes I did. The things that I see my students doing are the same mistakes I made. I often now look back as a committee member on 5 different medical admissions committees and think somebody should have smacked my little arrogant self when I came through, because I did all those typical things. You know, I wanted to be a pre-med because I wanted to help and serve and make a difference and make the world a better place. And honestly, those are all the reasons we should go to med school. But how you articulate that and how you figure out how you fit in is really the key and can be the difference between success and an acceptance and a denial. And so, I mean, many of you guys have spent countless hours putting together your primary application. And as I will share in just a few minutes, when it comes to the secondary application, because of the sheer number of applicants, about now, even with the pandemic, like 90% of schools are automatically generating secondaries. Some will do those the minute that AMCAS opens applications to view by schools, so they can see everybody who may be applying to their schools. Other schools wait until your application is verified to release them, and a smaller number of schools, and it's a shrinking number, will wait until you pass all of their screens to return a secondary. So, I mean, my first word of advice as we get into this is getting a secondary doesn't mean jack boo squat about a school's interest in you. It more than likely, especially at this point in the application, means, oh, you applied to my school, we shall send you a secondary. Because I'm going to tell you, it's all about the cha-ching, 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 or the dollars that come with that. And we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But on the other side, I have served as a pre-health advisor at an R1D1 institution. So we had about 5,000 kids in our pre-health program, and we had about 500 applicants on any given year. So I worked with tons of applicants, and then as an advisor directly to guide mentees to get in. I've been doing this for almost 23 years now. So I told you, I'm a dinosaur. I have an MD. My background is reproductive health and family planning, with board certification in family medicine and OBGYN. In addition, I have a master's in education and did PhDs in physiology and pharmacology. Please, folks, do not be impressed. At that time, I didn't want to get a job. Anyway, my years of experience in doing this, sitting on committees, working directly with schools, has really put me very well educated in the medical community. So more than anything, the advice I'm passing to you guys is really based on my time with not just working with students, but more what we see at that committee level, and kind of, I guess you might call it, the jadedness that many committee members have. So before we get into all of that, I just want to let you know that we're going to talk first about the secondary application. I'm going to give you some tips about how to approach those mounds of secondary essays that you're getting. And then we're going to talk about that interview process, because this is what everybody's hoping for, that you submit all this crap and you're going to get interviews. But let me explain one very key thing to you. Bright kids, and I know when you applied to college, if you guys applied wide, there were probably all kinds of acceptances, everything out there. College applications are highly based on what's your GPA and how you did on your SAT and ACT, and even less so as more colleges are getting rid of that. Med school applications, if you've heard me say time and time again, is so different. I mean, there are well over 50,000 applicants, an average of about 54 to 58,000 applicants every year for 19 to 20,000 spots. That means that only about 40% of people are going to get an acceptance. So on a good year, so the average number of students apply to between about 7 and 15 schools if you're sort of considering AMCAS. The students I work with generally apply to about 20 to 25. But on a good year, let's just say you apply to 20 schools. I've already told you that about 90% of schools automatically generate secondaries. So what that means is On a given year, you're going to submit maybe 20 applications. You're going to get roughly 18 to 20 secondaries because most schools are just sending those out in the hopes of, on a good year, getting 3, on an exceptional year, 5 interviews for maybe 1 acceptance. It is that competitive. And that's what you've got to understand going in. Also understanding, because so many of my students are like, I got my premed, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, we just started. We're like a month in. This is a year-long process. It starts in May when the application opens. We encourage, we preach, we beg, we plead to get your application in as close to opening day as possible, even if you're only submitting to 1 reach school to allow them to verify your application, even if you're waiting on an Mcat score, because it takes, as many of you have already seen, 4 to 8 weeks for AMCAS to actually verify your application. Now, AMCAS opens to schools, as we know, open the end of June. Throughout July and on into January, secondaries will continue to roll, but the bulk will likely come between July and September. And so there's going to be that whole process. Reviews will begin for most of those secondary MD applications around August by schools, because that's when most return. DO, that process starts earlier, as well as Texas, because they open for submission in May. They offer earlier interviews, and in Texas, they have the lottery, so they have to give those first passes in October and November. But as a general rule, you look for secondaries in that time. For interviews to start rolling out for Texas and DO schools somewhere in July and August, for MD programs, anywhere from August all the way through March, but the bulk will likely occur between October and January. Again, those are guidelines, not hard and fast rules. Most schools have a rolling admission. So the idea is the sooner you are through, the sooner you are interviewed, the more likely you will get one of those seats in a rolling admissions process. So those are all general concepts to think about when approaching your secondary essays and hoping for that all-important interview, because this process starts in May and runs all the way through April 30th of next year. So as I tell my students over and over and over again, patience, grasshopper. This is a long process. You spent many years to get here. Instant gratification is not going to be a part of this process. So before we go into all of that, let me do a quick poll so that I know the groups of people that I'm working with. So the first thing I want to do is, if this stupid thing will open, is open a poll so I can actually ask you the poll. So launch the poll. Can you tell me when you are planning or hope to apply? So have you already applied? Meaning your application has been submitted for the 2021-2022 application cycle, or this upcoming cycle, meaning next year, the 2022-2023 cycle, or future application cycles out. Oh, good. So I have a great diversity. So about 60% of you guys have already applied. So you guys are already drowning in that sea of secondaries. For those applying in upcoming cycles, please pay attention, because these will be excellent tidbits for you, not just for approaching secondary applications, but how you approach those all-important experiences and personal statements. So thank you guys so much for that. I appreciate it. Let me close the poll. Let's get on. All right, so let's talk a little bit about secondary applications. All right, so we already know they should be coming out. What are secondary essays? It's kind of a stupid question. That's like, when will I get these? How much time do I have? How long are the essays, and how can I prepare for them before I receive them? So we already talked a little bit about when you'll get these, and it's really varied. There are a large number of schools, and again, you guys have to remember that the secondary application fees help support our admissions offices. There are several schools that I work with, and if you read the fine print on any website or on the secondaries you receive, somewhere on there you will see, it can be like trying to find that unsubscribe button, but somewhere you will find a statement that says review of your secondary is based on meeting our credentials, whatever. It's a disclaimer that basically says, if you don't cut the mustard, we may never look at this, but thank you so much for your money. Do I necessarily think this is right? No, I don't, but I don't make the rules. So what you guys need to understand is Receipt of a secondary does not mean that they're going to look at it, that you're qualified for their school, or that you're going to get an interview. It means they see that you have applied to their school. In some cases, it may express an interest or whatever. Also, at this time, you may get all kinds of little sorted, automatically generated emails, which I will guarantee you they are automatically generated, that says, your application will be under review. You may receive a secondary anytime between here and here. These are all just meaning check, you're on our radar. How much time do I have before returning these? So a good rule of thumb is you should target, and again, guidelines, people, not rules. You should target 2 to 3 weeks from the time of receipt to return your secondary. What are the exceptions? All of the automatically generated secondaries that you get right now, and many of you are drowning in that sea because do the math. The average secondary is like 3 to 5 additional essays. You applied to 20 schools. Crap, you could be looking at 80 to 100 essays you got to generate in 2 to 3 weeks. Not going to happen. All right, so the rule of thumb is 2 to 3 weeks, and we're going to talk about prioritizing those in just a second. But for automatically generated secondaries, you should shoot for no later than the first part of August. The earlier, the better, but knowing that most schools will start pulling through their secondaries, you'd like to have them back in that time frame. Now, it's also important to check every secondary you get because some already have guidelines. Some say return within, I work for a school that you must return them within 7 days. And I'm going to tell you, if you miss that 7-day guideline, you're not going to get reviewed. And it happens every year, cry me a river, no exceptions. So make sure there is not a deadline for return. A general rule is 2 to 3 weeks, automatically generated secondaries at least by August as you plow through all of these. How long are the essays? Totally varied. Some are unlimited. That means please do not write them 5 pages. Nothing pisses us off more. Some says a minimum of a page. That does not mean fill up the whole page in 9-point font. Okay, you should cover the topics, and we're going to come back to that cover the topic, but they can be anywhere from, some are as short as 120 characters, some are as long as 500 words or a page, some are unlimited. I would say the average is between about 250 and 500 words, or somewhere around 2,300 characters, or about half the length of your personal statement. So remember, there will likely be 3 to 5 of these, so you need to focus on that content. What can you do to prepare for them? So we know they've already been designated and sent out to a lot of schools, but in the interim, while you're waiting on them, you can check, and I always provide my students with examples of prior secondary essays to give them some idea of the flavor of what they should write from. But there are also, you can check links from prior year secondaries. A lot of these are repeated, and a lot of common themes cross all schools. So I always try to help my students understand that the best approach is to generate a core of 9 to 10 base essays that cover most of the topics we see most commonly. I'm going to talk about it in just a second, and then use, revise, and revamp these based on each individual school. So what are some of those topics? Diversity. People, you've got to have a diversity, what makes you unique as an applicant, why we should accept you, something about the diversity and uniqueness you bring to the school. And the reason is, when we're looking at people, everybody's bringing the same stuff to the table. And I talk about this over and over and over again. Everybody's done the clinical, the service, the research, all the things you expect. Your goal is to figure out what makes you unique. What's your brand? What is your diversity? Be it your heritage. Are you first generation American? Have you immigrated here? Is there something about, did you grow up in an underserved community? Did you grow up in a fractured household? Did you grow up as a foster child? Have you overcome hurdles? Have you lost a parent? Have you experienced things? What exposures, what things have you done? What parts of your background? What makes you unique? Because we're looking at things that when we read these essays that will catch our eye, make you memorable, and will tell us that you will contribute to the uniqueness of our class, because we're trying to bring together groups of diverse types of people to learn and work together so they learn how to work with other people. Now, why this school? I am going to tell you all, if I read one more essay. And right now, so like some of the automatic generated essays are George Washington. And we always talk about schools that have Jesuit philosophy or whatever. And if I read one more DO essay or one more Jesuit philosophy, that is, we need to take care of the whole person as opposed to any other school, because every other med school teaches you only to take care of an arm or a leg. Don't state the obvious. And the why this school, the tendency is, I want to attend blah, 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 because of, and then you just spit off things from their website. Not the way to approach it. The way to approach these essays is to start with either a story or something unique about you, or experiences you have, and then say, as based on this, I look forward to participating in blah or this program or whatever. Do not just spit back to me all the programs that we already know we have. I know at Chapel Hill, if I read one more time about the Shack Clinic and this clinic or whatever, that things are already, and I love the essays that are like your unique curriculum that provides early clinical exposure. Yet every freaking program does that now. So you want to really speak to things and then always end with a component of what you bring to the school and your commitment to joining that class. So make sure that you really think about and follow the guidelines. And we're going to talk more about some tips about those particular essays. Personal challenge or moral dilemma. I probably laugh at least once a day while reading essays. So the first thing is, please, please, please try to stay away from the time you got a C in chemistry. Academic hurdles, just really, unless it's something major, like something really impacted your life, you lost a parent, you suffered some type of tragic loss, you had a personal thing, something that really impacted you, absolutely a personal dilemma or trauma. But I really laugh on a daily basis because I always get students who message me and go, I just really haven't had anything happen in my life. And I went, well, life is good for you, Skippy, because that's not sunshine and roses. But you really, and I've been encouraging people all along to think about a struggle that you personally grew through, because every time you read a prompt, you need to think about, why are they asking me this? Why do they want to know this? Diversity, we talked about why this school. A personal challenge, we're looking at how you handle conflict, how you handle hurdles, and how you survive and got better through them. Any additional information? Okay, this is a catch-22, because this is a place for you to expand on something maybe that you would have liked to talk about that none of their essays asked about, or that you got to talk about in your primary. So maybe you have a unique hobby, a unique travel experience, something that you have overcome. Absolutely talk about that. Other times people may need to highlight or accentuate maybe early academic performance, but only if you've addressed that and overcome it. If MCAT is an issue and there are extenuating circumstances, maybe you struggle to get additional time, or you had trouble getting that approval, or maybe something happened in the process, and we're not really in that COVID aspect of it anymore. But one of the things we don't want is for you to make excuses. Another thing that can often be covered here is if you chose not to use your university's review committee or health professions committee to provide a committee letter, if it was offered. Sometimes people have graduated later, sometimes they were recommended by their school. Depending upon what that circumstance is, you could address it there, but don't just write there for the sake of writing. If you really don't have anything to add, we don't have the time to read it. We prefer you leave it blank. Post-college activities after you've graduated, summarized, really, really important to make sure that this is clear and coherent. If you have a plan, make sure to break that out into separate paragraphs, show the journey and how it's benefiting your application process, as well as things that you have forthcoming. Most important, relationship, influential people who have impacted your life. Again, we're looking at, can you articulate something very specifically and concisely to me? I got a couple of messages today from some of my students who are really, really struggling to talk about, like, they're given an essay and they just want to throw in everything that they've done. And I've got to tell you, the human brain can't process all that. You are far better to discuss something really meaningful or one or two things versus just spitting off a laundry list of stuff that's already contained in your experiences. Same thing with your academic awards and achievements and your research. Now, your research, you really, really need to be able to articulate clearly what you did, what you learned, and how you grew from it. And I think one of the biggest mistakes I get in reading some of these secondaries is due to character count. There is a huge assumption that I either talked about it in my personal statement or in my experiences. A lot of schools, those aren't the same people reading that. The other thing is they're probably coming separately, and you've really got to put things in context. So your essays will be much more successful if they're put into context so people understand who, what, when, and where that happened. So for instance, if you talk about volunteering for an organization, that the name in no way implies what it is. Like, I volunteer with the Muscular Dystrophy Association, I can probably figure that out. But if it's got some random name like Partners with Hope, and they basically address domestic abuse partners or whatever, then you should put volunteering with Partners of Hope, an organization that deals with. Give me context, give me time, get the volume. Also, avoid, if you want to talk about people, it doesn't have to be a true name, but maybe you're going to talk about a patient experience where you might say, while working in Dr. Menlander's office, I met Sam, and 9-year-old boy was such and such. Just don't say I met a young patient, because in my head, I don't know male, female, age, context, anything. Give me 20 characters that let me know who that is. It'll make your so much more meaningful. Long-term goals. What do you want to practice after school? One of the big things is we do not expect you and prefer that you not go, I'm going to be a cardiothoracic surgeon, because you haven't done cardiothoracic surgery and you don't know. And any of you guys who have seen my initial Who You Are as an Applicant video understand I went into med school the whole time before going, I'm going to be a burn doctor, I'm going to be a plastic surgeon, got surgery, never hated a rotation so much, and then was like, now what am I going to do? Somebody in my arrogance of, I'm going to be a plastic surgeon, should have smacked me in my interviews. So be able to articulate thoughts and feelings about what you do. Having grown up in an underserved urban area, I would like to return to a city environment to create avenues for access to care for blah, 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 blah. I have an interest in potentially pursuing primary care, but my interest in research, I would potentially either like to engage in office-based research or work in a hospital setting. Make sure that you can kind of articulate the setting, the location, and the populations you want to work with. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, every school mission is essentially the same, and it is to create access and help the underserved. And we all go in with those altruistic goals. I'm going to work with Doctors Without Borders. Nobody's going to pay for treatment that they can't get. I'm going to serve all the underserved. And the reality is that Bill's family life hits, and few people actually really are able to follow through with all that. So be realistic in your thought process, but also your goals. If you're asked to give personal insight into yourself, we truly want you to be able to articulate what makes you unique, what experiences, what things have taught you about perseverance, time management, hurdles you've overcome. For instance, when I was in undergrad, made a deal with my parents that if I paid for my undergrad, they would pay for my grad school if I went. So I literally worked 3 jobs throughout college to pay for my college education, in addition to trying to get all of my attributes, all those usual pre-health things. And it truly taught me about how to juggle 95 balls in the air. And it's really funny because people now go, how do you manage to da-da-da? And my mind is so wired that way. And I think 99% of physicians are somewhat ADD, type A, all those general characteristics that help drive us to create that. But you've got to explain to me how you develop those attributes. Most important activity. This may or may not be listed in your AMCAS experiences, but this is your chance to go beyond 750, 1,325 characters to really give me more clarity about something that you've done and why it is important. All right, so you're drowning in a sea of essays. How do you survive? You come up with a game plan. So the first is, as you get them, sort through them all. Okay. Focus your energy on your schools and your programs. Now, hopefully, and I always have all my students go through a whole exercise of creating a school list, which is based on their priorities. Are they a reach school? Are they a target school? Are they a safety school? Although there are no such things, and sort of the basis of why this school and things about that. So the first thing is, a bunch of these secondaries are show me the money, which are click these boxes, send us $100, your secondary is in. Others are basically a simple reiteration of crap that is already in your AMCAS application. Mainly, again, got to have a reason to send that secondary, fill those out, knock that stuff out. Prioritize also based on if any of them have deadlines, get those knocked out. Once you get through there, I know everybody is like, I really want to go to X school. I live in North Carolina. 95% of my students who came to me were like, I really want to go to Carolina. And I always said, and we say it when you come in for a meeting with us, do you want to go to med school or do you want to go to Chapel Hill? Which is it? So yes, this may be your dream, your ultimate school, but I would encourage you to do a couple of essays or do a couple of those core essays before submitting that to your top choice schools, because so you can sort of refine and tweak those. Now, I'm not saying put them off for long, but get a couple of them in so you sort of address some of that stuff. Again, reply first to the schools whose secondaries are easy to get out, and outline secondary essays before you jump on the first one. So start to create a list, go through all those secondaries, look at all those topics, look at the things and the essays you're going to need to create those essays, and then work backwards. Okay, now I'm going to give you some more tips here, and this is going to be really, really important. This and the first one, because I'm about ready to like smack some of my students, because it is read the prompt, answer the prompt, answer the prompt. I can tell you at the academic level, we're already pulling our hair out. I don't know if it's part of the effect of the pandemic, people kind of being outside of the flow, but it was funny because one of my deans walked in the other day and was like, okay, clearly this incoming class can't read or answer the prompt, so we can eliminate a whole lot of people out the gate. You do not want to be shut out because you cannot read or answer. So the first step is read and answer all parts of the prompt, okay? They don't, if you got to answer what they ask. And I probably sent, I think, 6 essays back to students yesterday saying, you've got to rewrite this because you didn't answer the prompt. Did you read the prompt? And I got, but I didn't really want to write about that. No problem. Answer the prompt. More than anything, that will kill you with a school. It can be beautiful writing. You can answer everything else. You can turn it in on time. But if you don't answer the prompt, you're going to get screened out before we even screen you. All right. Do not repeat topics. I know that some schools, Duke, Miami, Greenville, there are schools out there that have a plethora of essays, and you're going to have some overlap. So you can talk about similar things, but if you've already written an essay for one school and it kind of fits another essay, please don't copy and paste that same essay. Give me some divide. And honestly, what that says is I'm lazy and your school's not important. Also, out the door. If you used an experience in one essay, make sure that you can apply it in another essay, but expand. Outline your general themes to prevent repetition. All right, stay within character count. Oh my goodness. Okay, there is a reason we limit character count. And it was really funny because one of the schools that I work for, we used to limit students to 200 characters. And I don't know who or what or why decided to change it, but they changed it from 200 characters to 500 words. And students, I have learned, will use what you give them. So we went from concisely well-worded themes to word vomit on a page. So stay within your character count. If they say 250 words, it should be 250 words or less. It is okay to be less than the word or character limit if you have answered the prompt, okay? Now, if they ask for up to 250 words and you write 15, probably going to get you screened out. So cover the content, but don't feel like you have to go to the limit. This will show the schools you can follow directions, that answering the prompt, staying within the character count, answering the question, so pivotal. Okay. Now, I do know that some schools, and I actually work for two of them that do, will allow the box to hold more than the allotted characters. Again, stay within your limits. And just like you did with your AMCAS application, if you type it in Word, copy and paste into Notepad, WordPad, whatever, and then paste into your application so you remove the excess characters that Word puts in. Again, you may have a few extra characters, but if you've worked it out in Word, stay with it. You've probably answered it well enough. Clear and concise. And I already talked about this earlier, but make sure that you take me to time, place, event, so I can understand it. Let me know what is going on in the background so that I understand what the heck you're talking about. Just like I tell people with their personal statement, you've lived your life, you've lived these events. Sometimes I don't know what you're talking about. You have got to use diversity of your words. Avoid cliches, avoid words like, and say physician instead of doctor. Do not ever start a paragraph with I. Don't. Watch how many times you use I, and try to avoid starting sentences with I. Use active tense, such as I took the time, versus taking the time to understand. Don't say I got to know. Say I had the opportunity to come to, or to meet, or whatever. Be active, be proactive, show group actions. Everything that I told you for experiences and personal statements applies in your secondary essays. Use word choice. Now, the other thing is, it's like feast or famine. It's either like fourth grade writing, I got to go to the mall, versus I had the opportunity to experience a beautiful, extravagant journey to the outskirts of the mall. And I'm like, what the heck's the sentence? So avoid being overwordy and underwordy. Be concise, clear, professional, and use higher levels of grammar, but don't look like you thumb through a thesaurus for a word that they're going to have to go look up. All right. Be careful when copying and pasting. I say this every single year, because you're copying from one school to another. And I see it most commonly in the why this school. And you get to that last part of the essay that says, the such and such curriculum will make me a blah, 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 blah. It's your concluding sentence, and you will copy and paste, and you will forget that this is no longer George Washington. You're now submitting to Georgetown, and we get it every year, every school, copy and paste. Check your character count, remain flexible. A lot of you guys get exhausted very early on, and you just want to copy and paste that essay. If you've got to change it, use the core part of it, but make the effort to revise it. Again, what it shows is that you're lazy if you don't. Be yourself, okay? Again, this is the same thing. I'm trying to get the school to see my passion and yeah, you can do that without 900 fluff words. And it is okay to balance the, and I think there was one that I did, this morning where a student talked about visiting her pediatric office all the time throughout her childhood because she was a klutz. And I sort of revised it to say, my mother often said commented that I was a frequent flyer, in quotes, at my pediatrician's office due to the number of times. Create something that is going to catch my attention and make it a little bit different from the same crap we read over and over. You want your secondaries to be an extension of your primary application, not a reiteration. All right, so that gets me through secondary essays. All right, read them, write them, answer them, get them out. And hope that somewhere in the next month or so, you will start to get that offer for an interview. Understand that they're going to book up quickly, so stay on top of your application, all right? If you applied to Texas or osteopathic programs, those should start rolling in sometime in the next month to month and a half to 2 months, so be prepared. In terms of interviews, I'm going to tell you, just like reading a secondary essay, first impressions are going to be critical. So if out the gate you say something stupid or awkward or unprofessional, that's going to come across that way. The same thing in your interview. Okay, so it's out the gate, the first thing is going to be, When you walk into, and I say this, your interview starts the minute you're going to enter the interview space, the office where you check yourself in. So when you greet the person who checks you in, when you're sitting and talking to other people, professional tone from start to finish, not just in your interview spot. Also, think about your appearance, how your hair looks, how your makeup looks. Now, you don't want to look like you're getting ready to go walk out the streets, but you also don't want to look like plain Jane. And I always get girls who go, is it okay to wear eye makeup? Is it okay to wear mascara? Yeah, we wear them in the workplace, don't you? In terms of outfit, be professional. Put some thought into this. If you don't own a suit, buy one. Go to a secondhand store, do something, buy it, get it tailored. This is your chance at fame. Please do not just pick out a pair of slacks and a jacket out of your closet. Wear a suit. Also, look for a power tie. A power tie is one that makes a statement. Over and over and over again, I see the people in the dark gray or black suit with a white shirt and a black and red tie. Welcome to the world of penguins. You look just like everybody else. You want to make a memorable statement. And that means not coming in with some tie with like condoms or stethoscopes all over it, but a tie that makes a statement. I always say, pick your suit first. Okay, when my son, and my son's a second year ER resident, when my son applied to medical school, he bought a charcoal gray and a navy blue suit. And then he bought multiple shirts and ties so that he could sort of match the schools that he interviewed at, but also made a dynamic statement. So I'll give an example. When he interviewed at Wake Forest, their colors are black and gold. So he wore his dark charcoal suit, and he actually wore, and when he first came up with it, I was like, no, that ain't gonna work. But he picked out this dynamic gold, black, gray, and white tie that was stunning. And then he put a deep gray shirt that was a different contrast to his charcoal suit with that tie, and it popped. And he said every interview that he went to, somebody commented on his appearance. So that's important. Now, on the other side of it, I can tell you that 2 years ago, we had a girl who came to the interview and her skirt was so short, everybody in the interview commented on what color underwear she had on. Automatic mistake. Okay, tone of voice, character, eye contact, all of these things are critical in making a good impression. Be prepared for any and all questions. We hear the same answers over and over and over again. Your goal in your interview process is to listen to the question, answer the question, just like a prompt, answer the question, and then use that as a segue to highlight an experience or an attribute about yourself. Your interviewer is not going to remember everything about you. Your goal is to know your 5 to 6 top selling points and to make sure you articulate them at some point in your interview to your interviewer. So when they reopen your application, typically, most of the schools I work with, you have a committee member who is in charge of reviewing your entire application and presenting that to the committee. And then you have 1 or 2 people who interviewed you that do a write-up and present you to the committee based on that interview. So, and we typically, most of my schools, we roll like every 2 weeks. So when you open that application back up, it's like, oh, that was that sharp-dressed man who talked about his work in Honduras or whatever. Okay, review your application and research the school. Know your selling points, the school selling points, and how you guys fit together. And send a thank you note. Now, this really varied this year because this year in COVID, which was a bloody nightmare for most of us, and hopefully that will never happen again in this fashion, that typically you have that opportunity to meet with someone face to face, and then you can send them a written thank you note. But because so many people were working remotely this past year, a lot of schools said don't bother with thank you notes or send them by email. It really doesn't matter if it's by email or by paper version. If a school allows it, please take the time to make sure you know your interviewers and send it directly to them. If you interviewed with a medical student, unless they give you your information, you will probably need to send those directly to the Office of Admissions and ask that they share it with that particular student. Thank you notes should be very concise. 5 to 6 lines maximum. Thank you so much for the time to interview me last Wednesday. I had a great time speaking with you about X, Y, and Z, whatever that was. I look forward to speaking with you further. Please feel free to reach out with any questions. Love, not love, obviously, but very short and concise. They are really meant to be a reminder of that particular person. So I'm actually going to open everything up for just some basic Q&A that you can type below. Our job here at the Princeton Review is we try to provide aspects on all ways. One of the things we know is that the two first screening components are your GPA and your MCAT. So here, if it's grades and struggling with coursework, we have our tutor.com open 24/7, 7 days a week. Somebody picks up within a minute to help you. If you're like me, I was always studying in the middle of the night, to boost your grades. Test scores, you know we reign at that, okay? Be it a self-paced score or our 515 guarantee. The key is not to relearn all the content. The key is to learn how to take the test. The strategy for approaching passages, for pacing yourself to take the test. One of the biggest mistakes I make is that people do not provide enough prep time to do enough practice tests before the exam. It's a marathon. You would not get up tomorrow morning, take one long run and say, I'm ready for a marathon. The same is true of the test. And then the most important part is, guys, I would tell you that 90% of the reapplicants that I get, when I get to work with people as reapplicants, we already know that 50% of people who get denied from med school have good GPAs and good MCAT scores, and their failure is how to complete the application. What makes a good personal statement? How do you write your experiences? Did you meet your core competencies? How did you submit those secondaries? How do you perform in an interview? How do you select the schools? Those are all the components that I and my team of experts bring here at TPR. We can do that from primary to your secondary application. We have packages that just do secondary and interview prep if you've already applied, and comprehensive, and then our premier package, which works directly with me and I will tell you, I literally take everything you send to me, rewrite it the way a committee wants it, and hand it back to you and basically say, go with it as you want. So from there, let's do that poll and get on to some questions. Where is my arrow? Oh, wait, back. Oh, no. Oh, shoot. Poll. Well, I'm trying, guys. Technology. I lost my arrow. That was the problem. All right, let's do my next poll. For those of you guys who are out there, before I get into the questions, what I'd really like to know is, do any of you guys would like to have any more advice about our MCAT classes, about how to navigate the admissions process? More specifically, if you have any questions that you might want to have about working with me or one of my teams of experts, let me know. Or about the services that we offer at tutor.com, just let me know and I'll make sure that somebody reaches out to you to answer any of those questions. So let me close the poll, get back to you guys. And is there some reason that my questions are not showing up here? Let me see. Ah, there we go. Thank you. They did not. So let me close this. You know, nothing is worse. Okay, I can see, you can hear me. All right, let me get to some questions. So I'm retaking the MCAT. So you've already tested once. So you're retesting in July. Would you recommend submitting secondaries with the original or lower MCAT score, or waiting to submit secondaries until the end of August when your retake is released? Okay, so here's the thing. If you've already put in your list of schools and your secondaries, it doesn't matter if you withdraw, okay? You're still going to be considered a reapplicant. So it's better to go ahead and, I mean, if you've got schools that are going to be way outside your reach, if your MCAT score doesn't come there, I definitely might hold off on those if money is an issue. What I would look at, though, is the sooner you get your secondaries in, that will mean when your score comes in, they're going to look at you. They're still going to consider you a reapplicant if you don't get in, either way, if you've already applied to the school. So I would recommend, if you've received a secondary, knowing that they're automatically generated, I would first prioritize by what we would call your target schools or your safety schools, sort of get those in with the range of your MCAT, and then those you're hoping for with your additional MCAT, unless they have a deadline, to wait on getting those out. I hope that made sense. We're talking about personal illness and how they affected your work being negative on an application. No, not at all. It really is important if it's been something that's impacted your work, your grades, any aspect, and how you learn to work around that. And I'll give you guys a perfect example. I used to work for the World Health Organization, and I did reproductive health and family planning for third world countries. And after the birth of my son, my second child, I was actually diagnosed with MS. And one of the aspects about my multiple sclerosis is that I have a seizure disorder that's triggered by flashing lights. So this prohibited me from being able to work internationally at the level I was wanting to. So my job skills had to be completely revamped, and I had to basically redo the way I did medicine because of that. So we want to see how you approach difficulties, how you work through them, and most importantly, how you come out better on the other side. One of the things I always say is you've got to demonstrate a positive attribute in the way that you grew. Should we be using a more narrative style or a professional formal voice when writing? You know, that really depends on the particular essay that you're writing. Generally, because of the number that we're reading, I prefer students to use more of a narrative style so we can see the journey that has a professional aspect of it. Now, exceptions are if you're talking about research. That should definitely have a more formal attribute. But when you're talking about hurdles or diversity or experiences, generally a more narrative style is more becoming. Does using big words, provided they actually make sense, work against us? There's a counterbalance on that. Okay, and I already talked about that. You want to use words, okay, so you want to avoid like got versus achieved, those types of things, but you don't want to use words that we're going to have to look it up in the dictionary. And that probably happens at least once a day for me. It's really funny because I think they said that in the days of Shakespeare, he had a vocabulary. There was a comedian who did this thing the other day, had a vocabulary of 48,000 words, and the average human now has a vocabulary of about 3,000, and which is frighteningly scary, which is why I think I see a lot of got, had, and. So you want to have a diverse language, but oftentimes at this particular point in time, additionally, I wish we could come up with some other words for that. So variety in the words that you use and diversity so that your words are more than 2 to 3 characters, but not that I have to go get a dictionary. So it is a balance. How do we draw the line between sounding like a bragger and being still confident in our abilities? And that is actually a very good question, because you want to explain. So for instance, being able to face these hurdles has enabled me to become a more confident person in terms of being able to manage my time effectively, be comfortable in my leadership skills, and be able to address hurdles when they come. If you back that up in your essay, you absolutely should articulate that. And honestly, the truth is, if you don't point it out to us when we're skimming it, we may miss it. Now, the other side of it is you don't want to go, I'm best and the brightest and all that other stuff. So we do need to be able to see, because again, as a physician, you've got to be confident and professional in your ability to approach patients, but also to make a diagnosis. For the AMC situational judgment test, no. Do all schools receive it? No, they don't. So this whole new aspect about Casper and all the different levels of it, I'm hoping this will go away in the next year, because first there was Casper, then there was the video, then there was the other part, and some schools require them, some don't. So out the gate, I say get your Casper done, do all 3 components of it as soon as possible. If a school doesn't use it, they won't use it. And I think what we're going to find is a lot of schools who said, hey, we want the video portion, we want this, are not even going to look at it. Because I don't know at the number of schools last year who panicked in the midst of COVID and said, yeah, let's do the video, let's do the AMC video, let's do this, and we never used them. So it's frustrating. Best prepare for it. Honestly, it is like a personality test. It is go with your gut and what you think would be the right choice, and you will do the right thing. I was in the 1% in the first percentile for Casper. Will this prevent me from getting interviews? It should not. Okay. We also know that sometimes there is a nervous and anxious component of it. And we will also look at other aspects of your application. Do you have any conduct issues? Have there been any red flags throughout your application? Sometimes, see, again, I hate these tests. So, do you have these options for candidates applying to Canadian schools and also applying to American schools, like how to stand out as an international applicant? So I'm assuming you're a Canadian applicant. So the good news is the majority of US schools consider, especially private schools, consider Canadian applicants as out of state. Okay, so you're not considered like an international applicant, even though you're international. So first of all, you have to make sure that the school takes international applicants, but then they will likely approach a Canadian applicant as more out of state. And there are public schools. The public schools I work for, two of them take international applicants and they take Canadian applicants. As a general rule, you're going to expect that your MCAT score needs to be about 2 points above their median to be a target school. So for instance, if your target school is school X and their median MCAT is 512, then to be in their range, you should probably be about 514 to 515. If it is a public school, you should be 4 points above their median. So like at the public schools I work for, our out-of-state screens are 2 above our median. International or are considered 4 above that median. And Canadian schools, I'm sure you already know the gist of this. I don't know how Canadians have any Canadian doctors because their acceptance rates, where we're 40%, y'all are like 20% and 11% in your top schools. So Canadian applicants are very, very, very well served to apply to US programs, especially those that favor international applicants as well as DO programs that consider international applicants. How would you recommend preparing for interviews for those of us who are not as articulate, especially when you're nervous? And that's a big thing. I struggle with this with my students all the time. So one of the things, the way I prepare students for interviews is so I have a whole litany of stuff. I have video, I have prompt questions, things like that. We always do our interview prep 2 weeks before their first interview. The reason is you don't want to be too long before, you don't want to be too close to the interview. So in our interview prep, we go through a series of the most common questions. And the goal is with that is to learn how to approach a question. It's not about the questions, it's about how you present it. So for instance, you take every question, and I always start my interview preps with the 2 that we hate. Tell me a little bit about yourself and why you want to be a physician or why you want to be an MD or a DO. The tell me a little bit about yourself is not to tell me your whole life story. This is truly your opportunity to give me some really cool nuggets and sound bites about you. So like for me, I grew up in redneck North Carolina in a town with 1,200 people on a farm. And if you did not leave when you graduated high school, you were probably never getting out. And so I grew up on a working class farm. I grew up hunting, fishing, riding my dirt bike, and priming tobacco with my daddy. And when I got to college, I actually went to college. I was pre-Olympian. I was scheduled to try out for the Olympic trials, and I blew out my knees before starting college. So I went to college on a gymnastics scholarship, ended up blowing out my knees, and I cheered for 3 years. So I was actually a cheerleader on our national championship basketball team. So go Pack. So, I mean, little interesting things about yourself. My siblings are 15 and 17 years older than me. I am a big oopsie in my family. Things that might tell me a little bit about your journey, how you grew up, how you came to decide about medicine. For me, I was actually an architectural design major. I had no desire to go to med school. So kind of how you got there. Those are the things that tell me a little bit about yourself. If it's a question, for instance, if you could sit on a park bench with anybody for 15 minutes, who would it be and why? And it's okay to take a pregnant pause, kind of like, it's really a good question. For me, actually, it would probably be my father, because my father was my role model and he was my mentor and he was the most important man in my life until I lost him very unexpectedly. And I would give anything to have 15 minutes to sit on a park bench, gain some insight from his wisdom, hear him call me sugar, sugar one more time, and just to listen to the words about his life. and you want to talk about how you got there, and you want to take them there. And it's okay. My son often said, he said, I made my interviewer cry today. And I said, as long as it wasn't from boredom with your, that's okay. Let them know you have a heart and a soul, and you need to take a breath and talk from here. Talk from your gut. Have a conversation. Talk with them, not at them. And I think that's probably the biggest mistake that my students make. They talk at me instead of with me. And that can make all the difference in the world. Another little tip: ask your interviewer something about themselves. People love to talk about themselves. So if you're maybe talking about, my husband and I are huge fishermen. Actually, he's fishing right now. And one of the things is to say, my passion, oh, that's fishing. Because if I'm not working, I'm fishing. Do you fish? Tell me, and get them engaged in something. And that's a good way to go. How do we approach this application process? Mcat Prep, if not able to afford the funding to go for additional help. Some of the costs for the additional burden on top of the fee to take the Mcat. Oh, trust me, you are not kidding about how do you best prepare for the Mcat. So there are tons of resources out there. So if you can't afford, and I was right there with you, I could have never afforded anything that I did. And one of the things is for like Mcat Prep, buy the books, use programs that have like self-study approaches. Honestly, TPR has a self-paced Mcat Prep that is far cheaper than the videos and the guide. If you're regimented and can do that, my admissions counseling has a self-paced admissions counseling that provides you access to a counselor to get insight, and you can get the resources so you have the examples and the videos, but you don't get that same personal reviews. And if you want to buy them a la carte, you can do that. So find budgeted ways that you can kind of work it into your system. And Google, use the AAMC website. Please stay off studentdoctor.net. That it is filled with, unless you're in the right areas, it is filled with so much hearsay and lies, I can't even deal with it. How much should I mention about being a reapplicant in secondaries, especially if I didn't previously apply to the school? So if you didn't previously apply to the school and the school does not ask, what have you done since graduation? But honestly, we really don't care as much about being a reapplicant at the individual school. If you've applied to us before, our screening standards are higher. But as a reapplicant, generally, we expect that you have fixed all the reasons you did not get in before you reapply and be able to articulate that. When questions are asked on secondaries for what you want to do after graduating from college, does that generally mean an undergraduate degree? I'm wondering how to answer as someone who has attended graduate programs. Really what they're wanting to do is, what are you looking to do with your life? Okay, so if it's like, what do you plan to do after graduating college? They're generally meaning, if you're graduating college and taking a gap year, what are you doing in that application year? If you've already completed grad programs, how are you using them? If you're a non-traditional student and you're coming into school, you say, after graduating college, I entered the workforce, I did X, Y, and Z, then I made the decision to pursue med school. As such, I am doing this. They're trying to get an understanding of the background they don't necessarily see on the application. They see somebody who's 30, but you don't really know how they got to this point. We're trying to get that insight before we get you in the interview room. I'm still waiting on my first Mcat score to come in, but will it delay my application in any major way? Well, if you're still waiting on your score, what I hope is you have submitted. If you would potentially pull out of the application process based on your Mcat score, like if it's not where you want it to be, I truly hope that you have submitted to one super reach school that you are never going to get into, so they're verifying your application right now. If you're waiting on your score to come back about right now, and you are or have been verified or based on that score, and they're already working on your verification, then add your schools, because now that we're released to schools, all of those schools will add automatically and you'll start getting your secondary. So as long as you still target the 1st of August, you'll be okay. It's people who tested the 1st of July on into that it's really going to start to get behind, and you really need to think about moving to the next cycle, because it's a waiting game and it's a rolling application, and it just looks like you weren't prepared. Currently writing secondaries, and a major part of my journey to medicine, oh, how I hate the journey to medicine, has been being transgender, and that the process both applies to my diversity as well as my personal challenges. Is it okay to talk about my identity in multiple essays? And absolutely. Okay, in the world that we live in, and I currently have multiple transgender students that I work with, members of who identify in all different types of fashions. Our world, and especially in the medical aspect, is really at a place where that needs to be, we need to know that you're comfortable with it, because you have to be comfortable with it as part of a class and with your patients, and to be able to embrace that. So it is very important for us to know that you are at that point. So absolutely. It won't impact. I get this all the time. It's like, I've got ADHD. I asked for extra time. We don't care. Do you not think that physicians have illnesses, occurrences, stuff like that? It is all part of natural life. Okay. I don't want to hear that you're a reformed bank robber and murderer. That's probably going to dissuade us. But normal life occurrences, it's normal. In your opinion, what is the best way to answer the prompt, why school versus in PAMP, without cliche responses? We actually don't get that one much. We get more, why this school? And it's generally on the other side, on the nurse practitioner side, that they say, why that versus MD? And it's not necessarily sounding cliche, but what are your target interests and the area at which you hope to have a role? So one of those things, and a lot of my students really admit, and that is important to me and important to schools, is the role you will take in your community, and looking for future physician leaders who will be teachers, who will be active in their state and local academies, advocating for change, components of that. So that is that segue that that type of leadership would embody. Oh, yay, is that it? That, I think I have answered all of our questions. Well, with that said, thank you guys so much for your time. I hope I shared the helpful information with you. If you guys have any information, any interest in learning about my particular services, someone will reach out to you. But if you'd like for somebody to get in touch with you quicker, go to our med admissions counseling website on the TPR website. And at the bottom of, at the top, it says click here to schedule an appointment. And you can schedule an appointment to teach, to speak directly with my enrollment advisor, who directly connects with me to answer questions about any of our programs, our services, working with me, etc. Regardless, I wish you guys all the best. Good luck. Kick it.